Raider Nation, what's going on? You're watching the Raiders Report. Coming up here on today's show, I got some surprise cut candidates to make sure that you aren't released and that you make your girl's 53-man roster. That probably is not a good roster to even be on. Go to Kanzuri.com/chat for some height-boosting shoes. I've been told they give you an extra 2.8 inches, and if she's got a 53-man, you might need that extra 2.8. Go down to the comments at Kanzuri.com/chat. Get yourself some height-boosting shoes. So what you're going to see here on today's show is I got 6 surprise cut candidates on the Raiders, and roster cuts are on August 29th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. To me, a surprise cut candidate is a player that many people believe end up making the roster, but end up do not making it. So let's go to the first surprise cut candidate here. I'm going to go with Netane Muti. I should also mention, just because they are a surprise cut candidate does not mean that they will end up getting cut. The Raiders re-signed him this offseason, and he's been primarily recently working at left guard. Dylan Parham's been battling some injuries. He suffered a concussion in the Week 1 preseason game up against the San Francisco 49ers, and Moody's been getting more work because of that. He's been playing some right guard this offseason, left guard. The Raiders like his ability to play both of those positions. He's definitely a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. And if the Silver and Black decide to move on from him, it is going to cost him a little bit of money, but it's really not too much to be concerned about. My question to you out there is this: will Netane Muti make the 53-man roster? I want you to type Y for yes, or I want you to go down to the comment section right now, and I want you to type your N for no. If Muti doesn't make it, it's because a young player really stepped up. If I had to predict who's going to be the starting offensive lineman this season for the Raiders, I'm going to say at left guard it's going to be Parham, and at right guard it's going to be Greg Van Roten. Muti was battling for it. I saw Alex Bars has been battling for that position as well, but to me, Greg Van Roten is going to be your starting right guard. In terms of Muti making the roster, I would say that there is a 40% chance that he ends up making it. Now, today's show, remember, y'all, is sponsored by Kanzuri. And I love these shoes because I'm going to be honest with you. My old girlfriend, she was the same height as me. When she would wear heels, I didn't like that. So to me, I can wear Kanzuris, and I would have been the exact same height. Luckily, Alex, she's like 5'2", so we're okay in that department. But fellas, have you ever wished that you were a little bit taller? Well, I got you covered here because of our sponsor, Kanzuri. Kanzuri makes shoes that make you up to 2.8 inches taller without anyone knowing. Look, girls get heels. Why can't we get a boost in confidence too? Kanzuri shoes are not only height boosting, but also stylish and comfortable. They're not grandpa's Velcro shoes, but fashionable shoes that can receive compliments, even without the height increase. The height increase soles are integrated into the shoes, making it the ultimate height hack. For a limited time, our listeners get an extra 15% off your order at Kanzuri.com/chat. The site is already 30% off, and with our link, you get an extra 15%. That's 45% off your entire order. Support our show and check them out at Kanzuri.com/chat. Life's short, but hey, you don't have to be. It's time to level up the playing field, fellas. Kanzuri is an absolute game changer when it comes to your dating life. Let's look at another surprise cut candidate here for the Silver and Black. The Raiders traded for Herron last offseason. They ended up giving up a 6th-round pick in return. They got Herron and a 7th-rounder, and he's just really struggled this entire preseason. Last season, it ended early because of an injury, and he's battled a few minor injuries this offseason. There's no doubt about that. If the Raiders decide to cut him, they save $1.01 million, and they eat absolutely nothing. To me, there are 2 players in regards to Netane Muti and Justin Herron. If it was up to me, I'm keeping Dalton Wagner over Herron. And the reason why I say that is because, yeah, Herron is right now a left tackle, but he was a right tackle with New England. If I'm Carmen Brasillo, I'm saying I want to roll with the UDFA, who's 6'8", 320, and has looked pretty damn good so far. No doubt about it. What are you laughing about? Making sure, I'll tell you what, he puts on Kanzuris, he might be 7 foot tall. Imagine that. That would be scary out there. But Wagner is a player that I would rather end up keeping over Herron. Another player that I would end up keeping over Muti, like I mentioned earlier in the show, is McClendon Curtis. It's not that I don't think that Herron can be an okay backup. He's probably one of the worst offensive linemen that you would end up keeping on the roster right now. And Muti can be a solid player too. But with Carmen Brasillo, with him being the mastermind of an offensive line coach that he is, I would just rather keep these two young players who have already shown you that they are getting better at a very rapid pace. To me, I am willing to bet on that. So I'm keeping Curtis over Netane Muti, and I'd keep Dalton Wagner over Justin Herron. For nonstop coverage of the Raiders, we got you covered here. Hit that subscribe button. And when the Raiders make their roster cuts, it's August 29th, 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when, a week from today, for those of you watching live. When the Raiders make these moves, Jeremy and I will be live on this show. We're going to go live probably 2 hours before the cut deadline ends up rolling down. It's going to be a crazy show. It's going to be a fun show. Might even have some giveaways, so stay tuned on that one. Subscribe. I don't want you to miss it. Let's go to another surprise cut candidate here, and it's John Jenkins, defensive tackle for the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders signed Jenkins this offseason because they have a need at defensive tackle, and let's be real, it's still one of their weakest positions from all their position groups, offense and defense. When the Raiders put out their most recent depth chart, they have him as a second stringer behind Jerry Tillery, right? The problem with that is I don't always buy into what teams put out in terms of a depth chart, especially McDaniels and Ziegler, because they are the king of trying to keep secrets. So if you move on from him, you do eat maybe a little bit more money compared to some of these other players out there. And yes, the Raiders like veterans. They like people who have worked with previously coached or previous coaches like Rob Leonard, and Jenkins has those ties with Rob Leonard. I just believe that they're going to go with some of these younger players here because out of the 8 guys on screen, you can realistically probably only keep 6 of them. Let's go with another defensive tackle here as a surprise cut candidate, and people who watch the show, it's probably not a surprise to you because I always say that he's going to end up getting cut. But for people who maybe the first time you're tuning in, Matthew Butler, drafted in the 5th round by the Las Vegas Raiders last season. And I've been told by a source, and it's a good source, that he's the worst defensive tackle on the roster. I get that the Raiders are a prideful team. And what do I mean? Like McDaniels and Ziegler, they want their guys to work out. But you still have to be able to say, are we putting the best product out there onto the field? And sure, you're going to eat $67,000. That's nothing, right, for a Raiders team. $870K you end up saving, and you give another player an opportunity. Like, to me, I would rather keep Nesta Jade Silvera, which I think is a better player over the Matthew Butler. Neil Farrell Jr. also probably could have made this list because there's been some reports out there that he hasn't quite been living up to the expectations that they were hoping for. But the Raiders have a lot of difficult decisions that they're going to have to make at defensive tackle, and for a lot of those reasons is why I believe Butler probably isn't going to end up making it. But what do y'all think? Does he make it or won't he make it? Will Butler be on the Raiders' 53-man roster? Only time's going to tell. I'm going to type my W for won't because that's personally what I would do. Let's go with another player here at cornerback. It is Tyler Hall. The Raiders re-signed him last season, not offseason, but last season, literally in the middle of the year. And Hall was in line to potentially start at slot corner this upcoming season. Essentially what happened was the Raiders went out. They got Duke Shelley, they got Marcus Peters, and then because of Peters and because of Jacorian Bennett really stepping up, and yeah, Bennett right now is battling some minor injury, but if Peters and Jacorian Bennett are both on the outside, that then puts Nate Hobbs on the inside. If they move on from him, they save his entire contract, $1.01 million. Amik Robertson has played extremely well. The Raiders like what they have in Sam Webb. Brandon Faison is battling an injury, was wearing a red jersey today at practice for those that are watching this live on Tuesday, but he is still battling out some injuries. I do think he's going to be okay. When you look at the money, they have a lot more money invested in a guy like Faison than they do like a Tyler Hall. To me, what it really comes down to is who they end up keeping between Amik and Hall. Amik has been getting more work with the ones, which doesn't always mean anything because last season the Raiders had Lester Cotton working with the right guard. He was not working with the right guard, starting at right guard, and end up not making the 53. They could be doing that. Like, to me, this regime has a lot more invested in Tyler Hall, but if Meek's out there showing like, hey, I'm a better slot corner than Hall, I think that that's the smarter thing that they have to do, and they should end up keeping him. So if they keep Robertson, they're not going to keep Tyler Hall. If they end up keeping Hall, then you could put Amik Robertson as probably a surprise cut candidate. Another player here that I want to bring up is David Long Jr., and the Raiders, this is the very first player that they signed in free agency this offseason. If you remember, the player that the Raiders signed last offseason first was Darius Phillips. And some of you are like, who the heck's that? The reason why you don't remember is because he didn't make the 53-man roster. This upcoming season, I believe that Patrick Graham convinces this organization that, hey, man, I need 6 corners. 7 would be a lot, just the way that the team ends up getting broken down when you do a 53-man. But if the Raiders keep 6 or 7 corners, I'm not sure if Long's going to make it. Sure, you're going to eat $625K, but a lot of the corners that are on this roster that are battling for that outside position, the money's very similar. Like, you eat almost $2 million by moving on by facing. That's not going to happen unless they take some sort of injury settlement. Marcus Peters-Bennett, they're going to make the roster. Nate Hobbs, going to make the roster. Duke Shelley, I hope, makes this team because he is the better corner, but they put David Long Jr. at the very, very bottom of this depth chart here, and I know that they like Sam Webb. So, like, what exactly is this organization going to do? I don't have the answers behind that. But what I do know is competition's going to bring out the best in these players, and usually when you sign a guy in free agency, the fan base expects that that player is going to make it. And for those reasons, that's why I have him down as a surprise cut candidate. So those are my 6 players that if the Raiders do not end up keeping, I think that Las Vegas fans would be a little bit surprised about it. So here's your opportunity right now. Go down in the comment sections, and I want you to name a player that would be a surprise cut candidate by the Raiders. Before I leave you all today, here are my, one more time, 6 surprise cut candidates. If you haven't already, take a screenshot. Don't be shy. Tag me, tag Jeremy on social media. We love seeing people who make it to the end of our videos because when you make it to the end, that means you care, and that can go a very, very long way. If you want more updates around this team, you can always follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, at MitchellRens365. I try to keep you guys up to date as humanly possible. When the surprise cuts start happening, we got you covered here. And again, we will be live on the Raiders Report on Tuesday when the cuts have to be made. 4 p.m. Eastern time. Set a reminder. I don't want you to miss it.